Amy, thanks for hooking up with me tonight. How are you?
I am good. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on. This is such a pleasure.
Absolutely. I appreciate that you reached out to me. I got really excited when we were getting this all put together. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, the more we could connect with others to specifically share the advocacy and education about mental wellness, I'm all in.
That's where I found myself strangely over the past couple of years is kind of walking the path and I guess putting the bricks together myself and then looking back down the path and going, there's a lot of people out there that can use those little steps, those little pushes and tricks and ideas. So here I am.
Yeah, and I love that you use the word bricks for when I speak to people and I talk about my own journey. I use the word foundation, like this building foundation, and it's very poignant that you say bricks, right? Because you are in fact building this foundation for yourself. So that's pretty awesome.
Right. I mean, that's kind of the way I've seen it is
Mm.
each milestone that I put down has been a pillar or a brick or whatever. But I guess the biggest concept to me that I've taken away from it so far is everything that I've achieved in the past couple of years of doing this are things that nobody will be able to take away from me.
No, because it's unique to you. And, there are, bajillion podcasts out there or speakers, whatever, that are going to share the same information, right? Or the same wanting to talk about mental health and mental wellness, but your story is unique, right? Just like everyone
Right.
else's. So what you go through and what I go through, it's going to hit that one person, and that one person is enough, right? Because it creates this ripple effect. Um,
Absolutely.
so I think that's important for others to know that it only takes one.
It really does. I mean, that's all it took for me. And now here I am. It's, me listening to an old episode of the Hunting Collective, and just one thing that was said, of course, on that was like, hey, that's kind of outside the box. Maybe I should kind of think about it a little bit.
Mm,
And it changed my perspective and kind of thrust me onto this path, which is a lot healthier and a lot safer than where I
yeah,
was before that.
yeah. And even again, to be that um, honest about that, that you could say these past, couple of years, that to me, when I hear that, is more than what was before, right? Because it's all about the current moment. And for me, I am a self-proclaimed anxiety warrior, and I have had anxiety as a child, but they didn't use words like that when I was younger, right? It was like, oh, she was just so emotional, oh, she cries all the time, or she's
Yeah,
always worried about something. And the reality was, yes, there was just so much incoming for me. And as a little child, how do you handle something like that? So I'm very open about, I have two boys who they themselves were diagnosed with anxiety, and just navigating that with them and helping them with the tools and being the best advocate I can for them. For give me one kid who doesn't. Give me one human who
absolutely.
doesn't have anything. So
See, and I think it's kind of that shift because, like you said, when we were younger, those words weren't in the vocabulary and
yeah.
definitely weren't in any kind of dialogue. And now that they are, there's a lot of the professional community that looks at it as it's an illness.
Mm,
However, if you take that fact that, you got the anxiety and it kind of feels like there's a pillow being pushed on you
mm.
and kind of holding you down, and you shift the thinking from the clinical that's an illness to the real life that's just an obstacle that you have to overcome, really puts a lot of power back in your hands.
It does. And, great point about illness. I think it's because we try to really have a definition of things, right? We as humans like tangible definitions and concrete reasons for why things are the way they are. And when I went through my personal journey, I mean, I would say my awakening or aha, if you want to say, happened about 2012. So this is how long I've been on it. And when I had my own shift in perspective of like, okay, this is not an illness, this is just how my brain is wired. And I remember, my mom said it beautifully. She's like, just think of a giant, like, wired board, like when they used to do the calls with all these wires,
Yeah,
mine is just wired this way and my kids are this way, right? So there's no one that's alike, which makes sense because not one human is alike. So the more I kept getting into that perspective shift, the more I embraced this as not so much it's not an illness, it's just my mental wellness. My brain is part of my body and should be looked at it as total body wellness,
absolutely.
so the more and more I really researched and saying, hey, my body is constantly telling me what I need, right? So the body's giving me what has this, say, dis-ease, right? It's not a disease, it's this dis-ease. So what can I do? Totally for modern therapy, totally for that scientific direction, but I'm a huge holistic person, I believe in meditation and, quieting the mind, and I'll take it as far as, hands-on healing. I took it all. I
Right.
really jumped into whatever I could get for myself to find that comfort. And it's a daily ritual and a daily habit, I should say. So for all you listeners out there, this is nothing that comes overnight.
No, it
This
does
is
not.
no, this is like, there's no, and again, I hate when people say there's a cure. It's not, there's no cure, it just is, your mind just
Right.
is, and you're just moving through the emotion. So to me, it's all about a perspective shift to start.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I've made very important in the way that I deliver things is, I'll tell the story. 9 times out of 10, there's a happy ending at the end of the story and there's the lesson. However, I emphasize that this is not an easy path, but it's one that we all need to go through.
Absolutely. And you know what? I purposely, even for myself, happy endings, again, is a state of perspective, right? So
Right.
if I got up in the morning and chose to put pants on, that's my happy ending, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I am consciously and intentionally choosing to participate in my life, and that's a big deal. And I think folks, because we're so focused on the go, 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 that we forget, my whole concept is acknowledging bravery, and being human in itself is brave. I'm sorry. Just getting up and acknowledging your life is damn brave. So I get very passionate
Absolutely,
about
it is.
it. Yeah.
Well, let's ride with that passion a little bit. Let's talk about the bravery of just getting up and facing your life.
Yeah. So I know, again, back in 2012, when I had my enough, I actually heard the word enough, and I was like, oh, this is it. I finally went off the deep end. I'm hearing voices, but the voice was really myself. It was like I had enough of where I was. And it was that opportunity to kind of like, okay, which way am I going to go? And I remember, I went through 9/11. I'm from New York. I was talking to you before we officially recorded, but my brother committed suicide when he was 19. So these are very major events in my life that were such a huge catalyst to really get me to the space of enough, right? So
Yeah.
I remember thinking about how we use the word brave, right? We always connect it with, say, an act of like running into a burning building to save someone, or soldiers. Again, not to diminish any of that. I was like, hey, don't you think getting up in the morning is brave?
Right.
Don't you think being an active participant, a human, is brave? So I had this shift in perspective. And then when I added the energy component to it, I'm like, what does it really mean to me to be brave? So I'm like thinking about, okay, how can I break this down? I think of brave as a bold, resilient, authentic, vulnerable energy, right? To me, that's brave. So I carried this with me as I was like shifting careers. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm meant to do. I am meant to be of service to help others. Someone out there, when I tell my story, is going to be like, hey, I totally get this, right? So this has been this path that I'm on about how can I help others acknowledge their bravery. So I am also a self-proclaimed bravery activator. That's part of on my business card, and it's really just helping myself activate that bravery and then in turn do it to others and hope they do it to someone else, right? It becomes this cyclical energy.
Yeah.
And you know, as I mentioned, I have two boys. I want them young to be comfortable and understanding with choosing to be who you are as brave, you know, and accepting who you are as brave. And there are going to be times that are really crappy, but that's just a moment in the grand scheme of the day, right? So we just got to
Right.
stay here. So it is a process that it's almost creating a new habit, a new way of thinking.
Absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's one spot that a lot of people can get lost in, is looking too far down the road,
Oh,
and you forget about the moment because you're busy planning this, planning that. You're trying to hold yourself to this expectation,
oh,
and in the process of that, that's like this wormhole where you just automatically, over time, you shift and you lose yourself.
absolutely. I mean, sing it, because I know that when I was officially getting into understanding what anxiety was, it totally reflected on how I was living my life. You know, before I did this, I was in fashion and music and planning events, right? So if things weren't on this color coordinated spreadsheet, right, I would freak out because
Yeah.
everything was just so planned out. So everything was this controlled chaos. I knew where things were going. Well, my life wasn't, you know, controlled. Forget it. It was its own chaos. So the amount of pressure that it was to fulfill these expectations that just never were going to, that's where that break happened, right? It's like my whole person couldn't take it anymore. So
Right.
I had that moment of break. And the way I describe it to people is, I remember being young when you jump in a pool and you sink yourself to the bottom, right? And you're laying on the bottom of the pool and you're looking up. You could still feel that intense weight of the water, right? And you're holding your breath, but you could still see the sky.
Yeah.
And that's how I describe my crash moment, if you say. It was like, well, you know, there's no other place to go but up. However, I'm gonna rest and wait, right? How much longer can I hold my breath before I could rise again?
Right.
And that's where this all began to really start to unfold.
In that moment, you kind of took the time to rest,
Mhm.
and you put your plan together, and that became the spreadsheet that you're so used to before.
Yeah, yeah. But it became a fluid spreadsheet, right?
Right.
And that was learning again. I had to relearn how to think, and that's again where, you know, the traditional therapy came in, of learning to stick to my ones. If you say, if you make a list from one through 10, I always want to be on 10. You know, I would
Right.
always want to miss out on 2 through 9, right? And that's where the meat is. That's where the good stuff is in that journey part. But of course, I was so like, I got to get to the end. That's where the anxiety would really kick in, right?
Yeah.
So this spreadsheet of mine had to get fluid. You know, I had to learn to just chill out, take the moment, you know, and allow things to unfold with still direction, right? You know, it's not like I'm not in control. It was just doing it where it wasn't so pressured with
Yeah.
expectation.
Yeah. It's kind of a matter of learning to let go of all the intangibles that you have no influence or control over.
Hmm.
And you just solely focus on what's in your hand and the aspects that you can influence the outcome of.
Yeah. And greatly, and again, brilliantly said. You know, for me, I also attribute to, there's a book that really, really shifted my life, and it's called The Four Agreements. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's by Don Miguel Ruiz. And basically, what he says is that everything that we're in is pretty much a dream, that we as humans have created this dream world, and that our reality is whatever we make it to be. So if we stop and think about everything past, every generation is only just following what the other generation did, right? And that
Right.
really made sense to me, because it's like, okay, at any moment I could be this generational breaker, you know, I could take the power back, rip up the scripted reality and begin in my space, right? I'm going to now decide where this is going to go. And he mentions 4 agreements that we should be living by, and it's be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, don't assume, and always do your best. And I
Yeah.
was like, man, these sound so easy, but holy crikey, they were so difficult. And I still consciously, try and abide by those 4 agreements. And wow, it's made a huge difference in my healing.
Yeah, see, my Quake book actually just happens to be The Obstacle in the Way by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No. Yeah, send that my way.
And then that kind of set me on the stoic path, which really put a lot of things in perspective and honestly has made this massive leap for me. And it's been, intelligible values that virtues that I've been able to navigate through and work into my daily life that honestly have made some major changes and improvements that I didn't think were possible.
Yeah.
So,
So
we all have those moments.
we have those moments if we choose to see them. I think a lot of us too, because we're so bogged down on the could has, should has, what ifs and stuff, that we don't see that possibility, in ourselves. And I attribute that to, social media and media in general. There's just so much incoming that, learning to really remove yourself and ask yourself without all that other distraction, how do you feel? Does it resonate with you? I know for me, when I went through and still going through, I lost friendships. My marriage ended, I had to, my way of thinking was not the same, right? So I'm moving in this
Right.
direction. My career changed, a lot changed.
And usually that's what happens, I've noticed, is you have that moment where everything, for lack of a better way to phrase it, hits rock bottom.
Yeah.
Then you kind of have that quake moment where everything starts to wake up, and next thing you know, you're like on this trajectory that's completely different from where you were at. It's like, wow, that's really inside of me, and that's really who I am.
Yeah. And I know for me, it was a combination. It was an awakening, right? It was a reminder. Do say sometimes that I was, stuck in amnesia for a while, and I reconnected to that natural spark that's always there. And that's from childhood too, right? Learning to repress those emotions because I was always told to quiet it down and not cry, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of, um, again, generational stuff that's in there as well. But I really learned to release blame. It is what it is. I'm only going to move forward. I
Right.
cannot change the past, but I can change the present and the future, right? By reevaluating and positioning things that are best for my highest and greatest good, right? So it's a brilliant, the most difficult, I don't even want to use the word hard, but it's a journey, man. And it's a solo one. Like, people don't understand. This
Yes.
is just you, you know?
Right. And I think it actually kind of sets up a good place to take things, because I know for me personally, and I'm sure you can relate, it took a lot of self conversation in order to sort these things out. And through that process of those self reflections, self conversations, you find yourself talking your way through how to break a lot of those unhealthy habits and cycles that you learned growing up.
Mhm. Yeah, you do. And it's a lot of, you know, um, using the word like shadow work, like really delving into that part that I hid away so so wonderfully, right? That
Yes.
it needs to come out now, right? And need is the operative word. It absolutely needs to come out. And I need to move through it. I need to actually like not just let it go. I need to move through it. I need to see it. And then really meet myself where I'm at that moment, and
Yeah.
then continue to move forward. And I know that there are many times I've kicking, screaming, cursing, you name it. I've done it all, but it's part of the process,
And I think that kicking and screaming thing is a very common aspect. I know I remember when I got, seriously into my talk therapy, one of the first things I warned my therapist was, hey, I'm going to kick and scream and you fight through this whole process. So good luck.
Mhm.
I don't believe anything's going to come out of it. However, those have been the greatest hours that I've invested within myself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then that's led to like this addiction almost like of self-talk where you can plan and you can strategize and think a little clearly in order how to reach that next objective.
Yeah. I know that there was a moment when I'm a really solution-based person, like, okay, there's got to be a solution for everything, right?
Right.
So I learned that even doing nothing is a solution, right? I learned that even that stillness in that moment is still a solution, right? So it became part of this overall toolkit of mine. And I'm constantly talking to myself, good Lord, for people who sit next to me, I mean, I'm always like, okay, Amy, what happens now? But I encourage people to do it too. There's so many levels to it too. When I mentioned before about I am an intuitive healer, I'm all about vibration. And when you talk, your voice is so healing for your body, right? um,
Right.
it's important to speak, it's important to scream, it's important to cry. All of those variables are so a part of your overall healing in general, just like overall, right? Not just
Yeah.
mental. So again, when I kept researching and learning that stuff, I was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna scream, cry, curse.
But it's funny because I've actually done all my therapy through the online forums and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the first text that I got back, my response to I kick and scream through everything, talk out loud to yourself.
Mm.
And do you know how weird that was? This coming from somebody that honestly, before this whole process, I didn't think I had a voice,
Oh wow.
or at least a voice even worth being heard. And to be told, go ahead, talk out loud to yourself, was like, huh? Is that really gonna do me any good? But yet it's made so much of a difference, and it's been something that's progressed me through all kinds of things, and trying to sort things out and planning and figuring out how I'm going to face a situation. It's a really powerful and amazing tool, even if at that moment when somebody tells you to try it, you don't feel like you have a valid voice, or let alone that your voice comes out. It does, and
Mm.
it's going to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that um hearing that you have a voice, right? That you're worthy to be heard, um it again, even young, I'll throw the whole gender in there, as a woman, as a young girl, like not to be loud or not to talk so much or whatever. That was part of me shutting out, right, and turning off and turning down,
Right.
and minimizing really where I want to go with things. I'm a fighter. I carry a soapbox around all the time. I'm for everyone's rights, right? So whenever I would go to protest and be for everyone, it was like,
Right.
okay, squish it down, right? So now that I'm in this space, I've never been more mouthy, like to myself, to people I'm around. I don't hold anything back. I mean, I am polite and compassionate, but it's this solidness, like, God, I know I'm meant to be heard, right? The power behind it has wholeheartedly been part of my healing, you know.
Right. And it's actually kind of funny as we talk through this a little bit. I guess I just kind of formed a thought that I never really thought about during that process, and still practicing talking out loud, is it helps you to develop your sense of self.
Mm,
Those might have been the first couple of stumbling blocks on me learning, you know, self-worth.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know if you know though, too, your voice is very soothing.
I've
And
heard
that,
that.
yeah. So again, it goes along with, I mean, look at what you're doing. Look what you chose to do as part of not only your healing, but to help others is to podcast, right? You have to
Right.
use your voice, right? So your energy is really, you could tell you've worked on yourself. Your foundation is solid. And the way, obviously listeners, we can't see each other, but I'm seeing you, it's a very comfortable space to be, right? Your energy is
Yeah.
giving off that I'm comfortable, to be in this space with you. So who knows where your voice goes? Do you sing?
I've never actually sang, but I played multiple instruments growing up and was in and out of multiple bands. So
Okay, so what did you play, may I ask?
I play guitar, bass, drums.
So again, you have an ear,
Yes.
right? So I will go back to say, when we talk about vibrational healing and sound healing, right? We emit a frequency that, you know, that's how we connect with people. We either jive with them or we don't. And that's because of that person's, vibration and the frequency that they're putting it out, right? And you could
Right.
tell, like when you listen to a song, I'm sure they're a wonderful singer, but just their tone, it just doesn't jive with me, right? But someone else is like, oh my God, they're absolutely amazing, because that's what works for them.
Yeah.
So when I got into this process of sound healing, there is actually certain frequencies that correlate with certain parts of the body. So they're called solfegeal tones, and they're like 528 hertz or 328 hertz or something like that. I'm totally messing up. People who are listening are probably like, oh my God. But just look up just look up solfegeal tones, and each one correlates to a certain chakra, which is the energy points in your body, which also connects to, say, an emotion, anxiety, depression, self-worth. And I swear by them. Like I swear by them. And I will do a nightly, say, meditation with that particular frequency that I need to work on. And I'm like, dang, this is fantastic. So sound is so healing, so healing. So take it however you want, whether but just try it out, because for someone who actually has worked with instruments and have been in multiple bands, sound is part of your life. It's more than what you think it is.
That is actually a very interesting wormhole. I think I'll probably dive down because I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
For me, like with the music has always been, I guess it's kind of ironic that I'm doing the podcasting thing now, because music was always my way of expressing, my feelings and, my emotions and whatnot. Because I wrote most of the songs that we would play and things like that.
Wow.
And, performing was kind of like, okay, it's out there and whatnot. But I've always got this instrument in my hand to hide behind. And now doing the podcast, there's nothing to hide behind. So it's really been a growing process, and it's been challenging at times.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. I know that I found a movement practice called NIA, which stands for Neurological Integrative Action. And I remember when I took it for the first time, it has 9 different movement arts combined into one. So it's got yoga and dance and martial arts and all of these great, great, great practices all in one. And I remember when I took the class for the first time, I sobbed my eyes out, like crying snot sob, And I went up to the teacher. I'm like, what is this? I was so angry. And she's like, oh, it's the magic of Mia. I said, well, you could take the magic and shove it. I'm like, I don't like it. Like, it was just so much coming out. And that's
Right.
again, it correlated to where I was. Like, it was time. My body just couldn't take it anymore. But what I realized was, if this could do this to me, then heck yeah, I want on this train, right? Like, I want to be part of this as well. And I jumped right in and started teaching, and never did I think that I wanted to teach, ever, ever, ever,
Yeah.
ever. I mean, I know I'm a dramatic lady, I like being on stage, but this was just such a whole different, separate section. Like, who would want to hear me? Who would
Right.
want to listen to what I have to say? And that, again, Nia became that catalyst. So podcasting could be the catalyst to you speaking, and who knows where this launches, you out into the
Right.
stratosphere. So please don't
And see,
discount it.
I don't. I actually respect the fact that, I'm doing it. I'm like, hey, I really feel like this is something important to me, and somebody's eventually going to hear it, whether I hear about it or not, and it's going to affect them. I mean, I've received emails and stuff like that it does. So obviously I'm doing a good thing with it. But
Yeah.
it's funny because that whole evolution and whatnot, especially with what we're doing and what we're talking about. I never thought I'd see myself doing this,
Yeah.
sharing this kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, the songs that I wrote were, if you really thought hard enough about it, probably covered that sort of stuff, but it was always covered up. So it was like an underlining theme.
Yeah.
And, now it's out there, and it's raw and it's authentic, and there's nothing covering the message. So doing it, it's like, man, it's difficult, but yet here I am, and I've really grown into it and started to really embrace it.
Yeah, I am a firm believer music heals all. I love, love, love music. And that, to me, makes sense why I've moved into sound healing, and why that's what resonates with me. And it makes sense then all along. I mean, I can't sing, but I do enjoy what music does to me on that kind of mental space, emotional, spiritual, whatever. But each of us, when you are doing these podcasts, you are in essence helping others write their own song, right? You are helping
Yeah,
others to reconnect to their voice and share their I guess soul anthem, right?
yeah,
And same for you, and that's why this platform is so magnificent. Like, I know for me, I don't have any interest in hosting a podcast, but I love speaking, because my goal is to speak globally, right? So this is my practice. This is my practice to connect with others and exchange information. One of the biggest things that I keep telling folks about is, this is a collaborative effort, right? We need each other, because we're all in this together, right? So you have some great stuff that I need to add to my toolkit. And then I
yeah,
hope that what I have, you add to yours, right? And then again, it's that ripple effect. So
yeah. The whole toolkit and coping mechanisms, it's something that just constantly is evolving. We're constantly evolving, refining, learning all kinds of new things. And,
yeah, yeah,
I believe that's something that not just my show, but other shows out there provide the opportunity for you to sit down with a one-sided conversation that you can relate to,
hmm,
and in an informal environment, and you're going to walk away with something at the end of the day.
absolutely, 100%. I did a podcast this morning with a woman in New Zealand, and it was like, this is why I love this type of platform, right? I could connect
Right.
with someone clear across the other side of the world, right? But we are absolutely connecting on that same vibrational frequency, right? About
Yeah.
mental wellness, and how we could all, come to that normalization of things and releasing stigma. Like, there's just so many of us out there, and it's everyone, really. It's not just pockets of people, it's just everyone, right? Everyone has got a
Right.
brain, everyone's got emotion. So this is not for a
Yeah.
selective community, we're all in this.
It's like I constantly say with all of it, if I can do this, then anybody can do it.
Mhm.
I'm nobody special, and
Well,
I
you
just
are.
kind of,
You are.
well,
So
yeah,
I'm
but I
gonna
mean,
stop and
in the grand scheme of things, I'm just like the next guy next to me, and if I can do it, anybody can.
yeah. And that again, this is where the four agreements will say be impeccable with your words. So you absolutely are something special. For the person next to you needs to hear you, and then you need to hear them. So that's that special connecting. So you know, acknowledging other people is so vital to our growth, right? Because it
Right.
keeps us, it keeps us in this, humanizes everything. Hey man, I don't know what you got going on in your life, but heck, I could totally relate to, you know,
Yeah.
feeling really bummed out today or stuff like that.
Yeah. And it's that whole just validation of being heard thing. That's all, as being human, that's something that we all need.
Yeah, yeah.
I know when things were at their lowest for me, I didn't have that. And I know that was part of how I couldn't figure out how to resolve the pain and the trauma I was going through, and the ultimate breakdown to the failed suicide attempt was because there was no other way out. Had I really honestly had the opportunity to even just have somebody open up and listen. But part of the problem with that is that as a whole, it's not that nobody wants to take the time. It's the fact that nobody knows how.
Mhm.
When somebody comes to you and says, man, I'm really at the end of my rope, and it's this, and this, and I don't know what to do anymore, and that's the only option. A lot of times, the response is going to be, it's going to be okay,
Mhm.
and that's just it. The natural instinct for most people isn't to sit down next to them and just listen. You don't have
Beautifully
to have
said.
the answers.
Mhm. Beautifully said. I know that was a big lesson for me. I'm a natural caretaker. I'm a natural empath, right? I have empathy and compassion for everyone. And I always wanted to solve it for everybody.
Right,
So when I was learning all of this for my own self, did I understand that the term holding space was so important to understand that I'm just there to hold that energetic space for them and say nothing, right? And
right.
just be there. Again, even if there's a boundary, like, do you want to hold my hand? But like allowing that person to tell you what they need, right?
Right.
As opposed to me solving. And that was another huge shift, because I know for me, when I was going through my own thing and I would say talk to people, it was like that constant SOS flag, right? And everyone's trying to tell me what to do, and I'm like, no, that's not it. Like it just, you're not listening to me, all this stuff, right? Because everyone's trying to solve it for me. And in
Yeah.
reality, I had to solve it. It's just now it's like, don't say anything, just listen.
Right. Right.
Yeah, big difference. So I approach that with my kids too, and it's still challenging, right? Because as a mom, I want to be like, yo, I'll solve it for you, but I've had to bite my tongue quite a number of times and just sit back. And then when they do ask, I'll say, can you give me a solution? What do you think? Type of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, that's so spot on.
Yeah. And I remember those early days of the talk therapy where I kind of spill my guts about the situation, and then I'd get, a question thrown at me as far as, do you think this or maybe that? And I'm like, why can't you just solve it for me? Give me the answer.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is kind of mindset that, as parents we instill in our kids that, hey, the power to answer these things, that these challenges, is within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, maybe sometimes you got to talk them out, but it's you that's got to solve them. And when you go outside yourself and let somebody else solve it for you, you end up putting yourself in a situation that can outright not be safe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh God, so spot on too. I know that You know, I've been in talk therapy, God, since, you know, right after my brother passed. And um, I think the whole world should be in therapy. I love it. But like I said, you know, adding other components to it. But the reality was there were many times where I would argue with my therapist, like, you know, just tell me what to do. You know,
Right.
I would fight with them, but I understood after, right? Um, why it had to happen the way it did. And again, when I tell people this journey is a solo one, you know, as much as, you know, I would sit and like close my eyes and scrunch my face and will it to happen, right? Like some magic fairy is going to come down and change it all. The reality is I'm the magic fairy, right? But
Right.
it it's a, again, this whole shift in mindset and perspective of what I know for me, and growing up, where how I was raised is by generational what they thought it should be, right?
Yeah.
And that's where things, you know, um, learning to forgive and grieving who I was prior and grieving, you know, loss. I mean, there's so many components to it, but man, I've never been in a better place ever, you know. Um,
Yeah. I mean, it's quite the struggle to get there, but then when you do, literally move mountains in your own world,
yeah,
to look back and be like, man, I can't believe I got here. This is so satisfying, fulfilling. It's a much
absolutely.
healthier space.
It's great because I tell people, like, there were moments where I was like, God, you know, the sky is so blue and it smells so much sweeter outside. You know, it was like
Right.
this veil kind of got lifted, and it's like, gosh dang it, like all this time. And listeners, again, there are moments, like, don't be fooled. I still will have moments where I'm like in the depths of despair and I'm thinking, this is the big one, you know, because then I'm physically having anxiety attacks. And, you
Yeah.
know, so it's a cycle and it moves itself, but I understand the triggers now more, right? I understand the that body awareness has gotten so much more heightened. So these, say, anxiety attacks or panic attacks, or even the sensations of going backwards, it's not as long, you
Right.
know, the duration of it is not as long, because I know where I don't want to go back to. So
Exactly.
stay focused in the moment.
Yeah. And that's, really that's the key, is learning how to read yourself.
Yeah.
And then I know for myself, I've experienced, especially recently, I don't know if you can relate, but you've got all that stuff, you're going good. And then you hit this uncharted water that really knocks you backwards. And the only thing that you're standing on as a life raft is, man, I really don't want to go back to square one. I don't want to be that person again.
Mm.
So then it's like this whole new navigation.
Absolutely. It's like the compass shifts, right?
Yeah.
And I tell folks, you know, the places that I say will go backwards is, yes, I'll have like a pint of ice cream. You know, I'm such an anxiety eater, so I will fall into those spaces again. But I accept it and I offer myself grace, and I'm like, okay, it's all cool, it's all right, take a moment. Now the journey has shifted this way, right? So I'm going to stop, I'm going to pause, I'm going to wait till I gather up everything I need, and then now, you know, chart this new course. And I've understand that that's just the way life's going to go, right? I don't want it to
Right.
be linear. Life isn't linear, right? There's no straight line at all. We've made that up in our heads, and that goes back to that book. It's like we've created this story that just doesn't exist. And now I could say, hey, I could write my own story on what life is. It's upside down, it's twists and turns, it's, you know, I go underwater, I go up, right? I'm in the
Right.
stars somewhere. Like, that's so important to acknowledge, right? Is to
Yeah.
accept what is, you know. So
Yeah. A lot of this is kind of like trial and error.
mhm. Completely
And,
like trial and error.
when you fall on your face, you got to give yourself that little bit of space and that grace to realize, I can let that happen for a minute and I'm going to get back up,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? what I did wasn't the answers, so let me go over here and try this resource. And if I fall on my face again, then I get back up and I try a different.
Yeah. And then accept the wins where you can, and that's
Right.
another thing too, that I, when I tell clients and even myself, like, if you acknowledge that you need help, good Lord, that's a win, 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 right? That you could say to yourself, hey, you know what? I need to talk to someone,
Yeah.
things are just not cool right now in my head. That to me is the biggest win of all, because to me, that's like that shift of like, okay, you're taking ownership and now you're going to do forward. Not that you're not going to go backwards again, right? But the
Right.
fact that you verbalize it, and that goes back to speaking it too, right? Your body is resonating and it's like, okay, sister, it's time to, get stuff done and figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. And I mean, like we keep saying, you just got to keep putting your shoes back on and one step at a time.
Yeah. And that's brave, right? That is brave.
Right.
And so my company, Bravery Brigade, I was watching a documentary on the suffragettes, right? When women were protesting to have rights and voting rights and stuff. And I remember they used the word brigade. And I'm like, that is such an old word, but such an amazing word, right? And then I'm thinking, hey, we are this brigade of brave people, right? Every single one of us is. So I now use this whole platform to get folks obviously to acknowledge their bravery. And then my clients, we do the process called intuitive soul polishing. And it's kind of like a holistic coaching type of guiding. I can't say talk therapy because I'm not a therapist, but in that space.
Right.
And we moved through a process that I created called the 4 P's to Peace, which was my own personal kind of 4 principles that I needed to get through when I was going through that really chunk of time. And the first P was shifting perspective. And then it moved on to practicing, which is practice the practice of life. And then moving on to patience, which is not a virtue that I got naturally. So I'm learning about patience. And then finally, it's about purpose and discovering purpose for the moment, right? Not being so big on and then that was my piece. So it's like, this piece in my pocket, this little 4 principles that I could use. So we moved through this process together, and ultimately everything that I end with is brave on, right? Everyone brave
Right.
on, brave on, brave on, brave on, because man, if you're getting up, like I said, that is brave. You're taking care of your family, that is brave, right?
Absolutely.
You're sitting in a cold hut somewhere, that's brave.
Right.
That is brave.
Well, Amy, why don't you go ahead and let us know where we can reach out to you at?
Okay, great. So I am braverybrigade.com is my website. I am on Instagram as Amy Gonzalez-Nelson with an E, Nelsen, and on Facebook as well as Amy Gonzalez-Nelson. I am taking clients under the intuitive soul polishing. So everyone needs a little bit of polishing in their soul, and we get together and we follow the 4 principles that I mentioned before. And it's all about, sharing this collective advocacy and education about mental wellness, and that we're all in this together.
Perfect. Absolutely. I feel like this is a conversation that can go on and on and on and on. And
I know.
unfortunately we gotta draw an end to it at some point.
Thank you so much, Mike, for your time. And, I love what you're doing. So I wish you much success and joy.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it. We got to hook up and carry it on again.
Absolutely.
All right. Until next time, I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye.